Hi, everybody. I'm Abdi Nazemian, the author of Like a Love Story, and I'm so excited to be here on Barnes & Noble's Facebook with Dean for a live discussion of the BNN YA Book Club pick, The Black Flamingo. This is my beloved copy. I'm so obsessed with this book. Dean, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and read from your beautiful book?
Okay, thank you so much, Abdi, for hosting this and chatting to me. Hi, everyone that's watching. My name's Dean Atta, and I am the author of The Black Flamingo. And I'm really excited to be chatting to you today. So do get your questions ready or just sit back and enjoy us chatting and answering questions. So I want to read from The Black Flamingo. The Black Flamingo is a coming of age story for a boy called Michael, who is a gay mixed race teenager in London. And he is at this point in the book 17, and he's gone to visit family in Cyprus. So Michael is mixed race, like I say. His mum's family is from Cyprus and his dad's family is from Jamaica, and he's grown up in London in the UK. And this is the first time he's gone on holiday and the first time he's seeing his grandparents. And there's a special thing that happens where he actually sees the Black Flamingo on the news, and he's with his grandfather, and this is what happens. Grandad goes back inside. He draws my attention to the news. The story, a black flamingo has landed on the island. An expert on screen explaining it is the opposite of an albino. Too much melanin, he says. Camera pans the salt lake full of pink, but the eye is drawn to that one black body in the flamboyance. The following evening, my beach towel and shorts dry on the balcony. Couples on mopeds ride past the house. Dogs walk humans before dinner. Grandad coughs violently, then lights another cigarette. Grandma calls us in to eat. The Black Flamingo is on the news again. I pick the dining chair facing the TV. Grandad asks, why does it matter if he's black? Adding, the other flamingos don't care. And I am certain what he's saying is I love you. And so, yeah, that was the first part of the book that I wrote. And it was inspired by actually my own visit to Cyprus and a conversation with my own grandfather. And I've actually dedicated the book to my grandfather, George. And yeah, the kind of image of the Black Flamingo was the catalyst for this whole story to come. So later on in the book, Michael becomes a drag performer, and he takes the idea of the Black Flamingo for his drag alter ego, and he wears black feathers and high heels and does the pose on one leg, and yeah, has a great time with it. So it kind of taps into a lot of things that Michael hadn't realized or expressed about who he was. And it begins with kind of his mixed race identity, but also moves into his queer identity and then his drag persona or alter ego.
That's so beautiful. I love that passage. I love the whole book. So, well, okay. So first question from me. In the acknowledgements, you mentioned that this began as a collection of poems before being transformed into a verse novel. And I was just wondering if you could tell us more about how that process of going from poetry to a verse novel took shape, and also whether those original poems were from your perspective or from Michael's.
So I wrote a lot of poems inspired by seeing the Black Flamingo. I wrote some poems as the flamingo. I wrote some poems as me. And then when the idea for a novel in verse came about, I then started writing as Michael. And Michael is a teenager today. And Michael is has a bit more vocabulary available to him than I had when I was a teenager. So it was really interesting kind of going back and thinking about what was my teens like, but what's it like for teenagers today, and bringing my kind of emotional truth to the kind of realities of teenage life today was really interesting. So yeah, I've always written poetry, and I started writing poetry when I was a teenager, and it was my main form of expression. And I'd write things that I wouldn't necessarily want to tell people. And I've given that quality to Michael as well. So he has a poetry journal. So as well as this being a novel in verse where it's kind of narrated in poetry, you also get a glimpse into Michael's notebook. So you get to see the poems that he writes for himself and hasn't shown anyone. So that's really interesting. You get a glimpse into almost like his journal as well. So it was fun to become, you know, Michael, a teenager today, and think, what would he have to say about the world around him, you know, in terms of what's available now, in terms of, you know, being able to express yourself and your sexuality, your gender expression, and a lot more role models. Like something I really enjoyed was when Michael kind of discovers all the Black queer role models and kind of people that have come before that kind of paved the way for him to be able to, you know, be as free as he is in the book. Yeah. But the journey from poetry to novel in verse kind of came about because I read some novels in verse, such as The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, and Moonrise by Sarah Crossan, and Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. And I just have fallen in love with the form. And I think a novel in verse, for me, who's kind of really comfortable with writing poetry, felt like a way into, you know, writing in a longer form, because I'm used to writing short, snappy poems. Like that extract, you know, I read is part of a longer, you know, passage where he's in Cyprus and he's getting to know his Cypriot family. But I like to have it in kind of snappy, you know, pieces, so that you can kind of just get a glimpse of it and it still makes sense to you. It still has an emotional impact after every couple of pages. So you don't have to read many pages to kind of feel something, because poetry, I think, is about feeling. It's about getting into the emotional truth of what's going on. You know, there's some description, but just kind of things that will just let you know where we are, and then get into what's happening and how we feel. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's such an emotional read. I've read it twice now, and it just like each passage just like gets you. It's really powerful. So I wanted to talk a bit about names. Michael has different names at different points in his life. Some names he's given, some he chooses for himself. And for me, at least, it made me think a lot about the importance of creating your own identity, especially as a queer person. I think a lot of us do that. At one point, Michael even says, I love this line, says, I don't need a plane because with my new name, I can really fly. So I just wanted you to talk about the importance of names in this book, and what does a new name give you that helps you take flight? Or what would Michael, you know, why does Michael feel that way?
So yeah, Michael changes his name several times, and it's really interesting. Quite young, at age 7, he decides he doesn't want his father's surname, because his dad isn't around, and you know, he wants to have the same last name as his mother. So he asks her to change it, and she does that for him. And that is, you know, really empowering for Michael, and it makes him feel closer to his mother and that side of the family. And also, when his mum has another child with a different father, they now, him and his sister, have the same surname. So, you know, there's a whole thing about them being half siblings, and his mom's like, you're not half anything. And I think that's really important to Michael and his sibling Anna in the book, that they have the same last name. But then also Michael's name changes depending on who he's with. So, you know, he's Michael with his mum, but also with her family in Cyprus. They call him Michalis, which is like a Greek way of saying Michael. And then with his dad's family, because although he's not close to his father, he is close to his dad's brother, his Uncle B. And his Uncle B calls him Mikey. And then other people, when he gets to university, they call him Mike. And so, you know, his name's getting shorter. And then it gets much longer because he becomes the Black Flamingo. And that's, you know, a whole nother thing. But that is, again, a name he chooses for himself, inspired by the sighting of the flamingo in Cyprus with his grandfather. So, you know, that comes back in, you know, 3 years later, he kind of suddenly decides, I'm the Black Flamingo. And that's a really powerful moment for him. So yeah, getting to rename himself, as well as getting nicknames from other people, is really interesting for Michael. And it shows, you know, how many different people we can be all at once.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that was very powerful for me is that it felt in the novel that when he became the Black Flamingo, it allowed him to unite all of his different identities. I'm not sure if that was completely your intent. It seemed that there was this liberation that came with drag in particular. And that's something I wanted to ask you about too, because there's a character in the book who said something that really resonated with me, where the character says, "Why do you have to hide behind a costume like this?" And really what the book depicts is drag as the opposite of hiding in a lot of ways. That, you know, with the Black Flamingo, he becomes the most real iteration of himself. So I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are on, you know, drag and the use of drag in this story, and, you know, what it means to the creation of a true identity.
Well, I did drag as research for this book, and it's so empowering. Like when you put those heels on, it's not just that you feel taller, you just feel so much more powerful. And yeah, I think as a man, as a cis man, I had always, you know, resisted some of these things, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but it's just it was really great to give it a go and have so much fun with it and have such a good response. And I kind of put some of that into Michael's experience, and it just gave him so much more confidence to speak his mind, to say things. And I think you'll notice, like, as you read the book, you know, he's picking things up from other friends, and, you know, people give him advice and people tell him things that then when he goes on stage as the Black Flamingo, he's kind of like not only saying, you know, Michael's truths, he's also representing some of the other views that he's kind of picked up on along the way. So he's kind of educating himself. He's really listening to others. And you can tell when he goes on stage as the Black Flamingo, what he's absorbed from, you know, the friends he's made in drag society and the other friends he's made at university, and the life lessons he's learned and the reflections he's had on his childhood as well. You know, at the beginning of the book, he wants a Barbie doll, and by the end of the book, he kind of is the Barbie doll. But when, you know, as a boy, he didn't, you know, necessarily feel totally comfortable playing with the Barbie doll because, you know, his mum wouldn't let him take it out of the house. So he knew there was something about that it was okay to have it at home, but maybe not outside. And there's an element of that with drag. You know, I've had my own experiences with drag where I do drag in a queer venue and I feel amazing, but then to travel home, I take it all off. I take the makeup off, I change my clothes, and if I don't, I'll take a taxi home because I don't feel safe in that outfit or that persona. That persona is safe in safe spaces, but outside, you know, it's not so safe. And so I really feel for, you know, gender non-conforming people that, you know, will be attacked in the streets because we are not so accepting all the time. You know, there's certain spaces where people are free to express themselves, and there's other spaces where it's really dangerous.
Yeah, and I think this book really speaks to that importance of queer spaces. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of the scene where he goes to the club toward the end of the book and feels that sense of safety and liberation. But speaking of the Barbie dolls, I wanted to talk a little bit about gender in the novel. It's such a huge theme. And one thing that really struck me is the way that you describe patriarchy as not only boxing girls in, but boys too. A description I really loved in the book is when Michael says that boys are sand castles and patriarchy is the bucket. I thought that was really, really beautiful. And I was kind of both how you came up with that description, but also what it means to you, what this idea of what patriarchy does to young boys means.
Yeah, I think it really, you know, boxes us in, and I think, you know, young boys. I have two nieces, and I've seen, you know, how they are free to play with what they want, dress how they want. But I kind of think about, you know, boys who it's really, you know, exceptional for a boy to have a Barbie doll or to want to wear a dress, and, you know, parents are really praised if they let them, or, you know, and it's just like it shouldn't be praised or kind of look put down. It's just like, let the child play with toys, let the child dress up and play make believe. You know, childhood is for that. You know, and I just don't think we give as much freedom to children of any gender as we could. You know, just to play, and that's all it is. You know, it's not necessarily going to decide anything about who they are as an adult. It's just them having fun and playing. And, obviously children do imitate things that they see. I know that when I sit and read with my nieces or in front of my nieces, they want to get a book as well. So I do know children are influenced by us. And, but I think that then we need to be, positive role models in that respect, and show, how free and liberated, you can be as an adult, and let children see that and let them feel that as well. So yeah, with the sandcastle kind of bucket metaphor, I think, I just think, sandcastles usually would kind of crumble, when you kind of take the bucket off. But I feel like boys and men just stay in that fixed form. It's just like, this is what it is to be a boy. This is what it is to be a man. And we're not allowed to kind of flow and change shape and reform ourselves, And so I really think about, how sand can just do that and take on a new shape. You can make something else with it. And also, that's thanks to water as well. And I use the sea as kind of a kind of metaphor for fluidity as well in the book. And I just think, I enjoyed using those kind of beautiful kind of things that nature provides to you. So that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful way to think about it, and it's so visual. As you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that I have twins who are a boy and a girl, and you really see when you have children who are the same exact age of different genders how society treats them so differently. And I feel like you speak to that so beautifully. I wanted to talk also a little bit about shame, which is this huge theme in the book. You explore the shame of sexuality, the shame of being mixed race in certain cases, which both Michael and Daisy deal with. I love when Michael, after being forced to fight with a group of boys in a very visceral scene, he says, "I'm stuck here with my shame." And I was curious both how you feel Michael overcomes shame, but also what advice you might have for young readers who are dealing with overcoming shame.
Big question. How
warmed you up? Come on.
I think therapy helps. But honestly, I also think that Michael overcomes it with the support of friends and family. And there's little things that happen that really make a huge impression on Michael. For example, his sports teacher wears these rainbow laces, and this is kind of a symbol of just solidarity with the LGBT community. And even though Michael isn't the most sporty child, he feels really accepted when he sees his sports teacher wearing those rainbow laces. And just that kind of symbolism, that kind of solidarity, goes a long way. So I think, he doesn't overcome it on his own. I think he overcomes it with, caring and responsible adults supporting him and affirming him. So his mother, his uncle, his teachers. I think it would have been a completely different story if Michael didn't have those affirming adults. I don't think it's on. It should rest on the child at the shoulders of a child to dismantle shame that is coming from structures of patriarchy and homophobia. Like, it's not the young person's responsibility to dismantle that. I mean, they do it, just by being their beautiful selves, but it is not their responsibility. Their only responsibility is for themselves to stay safe, and then to when they feel safe, maybe coming out, maybe finding solidarity in other queer people, finding groups. If your school has a group, if you can find a group in your local area. I think being with other people that affirm you, whether they are in the LGBT community or allies, I think that makes the difference. So I think, Michael really gets it when he joins Drag Society. He sees people of all races, all shapes, and all, kind of just there, all sexualities, but there to do this kind of common thing of drag. And so I think that is the space where Michael feels the most accepted and the most kind of free. He tries other groups, and he goes to the LGBT society. Actually, he doesn't actually feel like he fits in there. He goes to a kind of African and Caribbean Students Society University, and he doesn't actually feel like he fits in there because he doesn't want to be totally boxed in by specific identities. He just, he's quite a dramatic, fun, performative child. or young person, and that's the thing that he relates to people on. And so, you know, being a performer. So I think it's about, you know, finding people, whether it's to do with sexuality or, you know, a hobby or an interest that you can be around that let you just be yourself. I think that's the most important thing. And I think the shame kind of melts away when you're with people that affirm you.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's certainly been my experience. I love the way, and going back to those shoelaces, it's such a great image that I think the line is that, you know, Michael feels the shoelaces tell him it's okay to be gay, which I think is just, I've never heard shoelaces described in a more wonderful book. But I'm curious, like, did you have things like that growing up? Like, what were your shoelaces? Who were the people or the moments that made you feel like you could step into your own truth?
I mean, I did a lot of theater. I did a lot of performing as a child. And so whether I knew it or not, you know, I was around lots of LGBT people in the theater world. And so I did performances on the West End, stages at the London Palladium. I was in a production of Oliver twice, and I was in a production of Bugsy Malone in the West End as well. And yeah, and I sang at the Royal Albert Hall and Glyndebourne Opera House and Eton College. And so, like, I think being in drama productions, being in choirs, having amazing drama teachers and choir directors, that some of them were gay and some of them weren't, but just people just being free, men that were flamboyant, women that were, you know, butch, and also people that were just whoever they wanted to be. So I think I was around young people and adults that were really free in kind of like being you know, performative and flamboyant and affectionate, and it just felt like a really lovely space. And so I'm really grateful to my mum for kind of making that possible, because at first that was at a huge expense to her. She put me through drama classes and singing classes and dance classes as a single parent. You know, that was really expensive, but it was my passion, and so she supported it. But then, yeah, it paid off, because I think it really made me so confident in a way that, you know, I'm so thankful for. So that was it for me, performing. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I want to see you in Bugsy Malone and Oliver.
There's clips. I'll send you some clips.
Oh, yes, please. I was in musicals when I was young too, but I couldn't sing, so I was always like the dancer in the background in a chorus line and things like that. But love musicals. I'll ask a few more questions, but for the audience out there, please ask your questions. We'll get to yours soon. And just as a reminder, everyone out there, hopefully you've already read this amazing book, but get your copy. It is the best. So I wanted to talk about writing sexuality, particularly queer sexuality, for the young adult audience. I found your book so refreshingly blunt about queer sexuality. I thought Michael's first sexual experience with apps and poppers was just something a lot of queer people to read and might relate to. But I want to ask you what that process was like for you, knowing that this was for a young audience.
I think YA is such a bold genre, and I didn't realize it was until I entered it. You know, I really thought when I began this that I was going to be really censored quite heavily, but I was not. I was really given freedom to write the experiences in a way that felt authentic and true. And you know, my editor kind of gave me some guidance, you know, and told me, you know, what things might not get past, you know, librarians or teachers or parents. But for the most part, it was then left to me to decide what I wanted to kind of bring back. So I think often with the sexuality, in terms of like, you know, actual sex and stuff, it was just more about panning away. Like you get to the moment. You know, what was important for me was to like consent was something I really wanted to kind of explore. And so, you know, Michael's second experience is, you know, quite a clearly consensual, you know, positive experience. And I think that was really important for me to kind of put in there. But as well as, you know, the more shady kind of experience where, you know, his family don't know where he is and he's just gone to meet some guy, because, you know, these things do happen. And I didn't want to like kind of shy away from things that I know to be true. And I was just really grateful that this genre allows you to do that, and teenagers appreciate the authenticity of that, and parents and teachers and the like can maybe learn from it. But again, parents and teachers have been young people as well, so they know.
Yeah, no, I just, for
And they
me,
might not
it
want
was
to tell.
yeah,
Yeah, I think because parents and teachers don't necessarily want to tell their own children that are in their care, what they got up to as a teenager. So I think it's important that there's novels that reflect teenage experience in a kind of constructive way that kind of shows if there's consequences or regrets or whatever it might be. But things aren't off limits. You just got to be even-handed about how you present these things.
yeah, I agree with you. And I think what's great is so many of these books are being taught in schools or discussed with librarians. And like you were saying about the importance of having, mentors and people who make you feel safe. I feel like young people can read a book like this and bring their questions to people now in a way that they certainly couldn't when I was young. And it's very powerful. Okay, I'll keep going, and soon we'll go to questions. So I wanted to talk about Michael's background, particularly his Jamaican side, because it's illegal to have gay sex there, and Michael talks about that. And being from Iran, where being gay is punishable by death, is very much stuck with me. And I was just wondering if you could speak to this part of Michael's identity and his quest to become whole.
I think it really troubles Michael. I think he's grateful to be in the UK where, you can be gay and you're protected by law, and there is gay marriage, and gay people can adopt. He could get that happily ever after if he wanted. But I think that comes with a sense of guilt and responsibility, knowing that in other places in the world, people don't have that freedom and protection. And so I think even, as a teenager, he's feeling that guilt. And, I feel that as an adult. I was watching a documentary recently about what's going on in Russia, in Chechnya, and they're pretty much hunting gay people and torturing them, perhaps being murdered, or definitely going missing. And so people are fleeing Russia and Chechnya for that reason at the moment. And so there's so many countries in the world where that is the reality, and so for Michael, it's close to him in the fact that his, family is Jamaican on his dad's side. And so he is nervous about the idea of going to Jamaica. It's put to him in the book that maybe they'll go for Christmas. And he finds that really terrifying. And, I've been to Jamaica twice and I was fine. And, it's not that anyone's hunting you necessarily, especially not as a tourist. But, I know lots of people that have left Jamaica to come to the UK and to go to other countries because it's just too difficult, to live undercover like that, to kind of, unless you're quite wealthy, middle class, and you can kind of live a sheltered life. It's very hard to, live like that. And so, yeah, it's difficult. And I think Michael isn't as aware of it as we are as adults. But I think he's starting to gain that awareness of kind of the global situation and the unfairness of that. But I guess he also feels grateful that he lives in a country where he can be free to express himself in this way and live the life that is true to him.
Yeah, no, you wrote that so well, and so many queer people who are immigrants deal with that. I know I do, where you are both very proud of the cultures you come from, but also grateful to live in one that allows you to live openly, and finding that balance is beautifully written. Okay, I believe it's time to go to some questions from you guys. So I will be scrolling through. Okay, here's one. This one comes from Hannah Good. The question is, what books were you inspired by as a young person, and more recently writing this novel?
So I've mentioned some of them already. So I think I'd say The Poet X was like number one. Like, I think as a verse novel, I think it's just brilliant. It's a masterclass in writing verse novels. When I was younger, I was really inspired by Roald Dahl. Like, I really like his way of telling stories. I also liked, because I'm into poetry. I really liked, when I was really young, I really liked Dr. Seuss. I kind of like nonsense rhyming and kind of just having fun with poetry as well. I don't write that style, but I enjoy it. Kind of definitely enjoyed it as a kid. And then I really liked Maya Angelou's poetry, and I put that in Michael's character as well, because I think her poetry, as well as the poetry of Gil Scott Heron, just really get to the point. They're just straight to it. And they tell it like it is. And there's pain, but there's also empowerment, and there's also a lot of strength. And we can take strength from their writing, and we can learn from their writing. So I think, yeah, in terms of poetry, those were two that really inspired me: Maya Angelou and Gil Scott Heron.
Great. Okay, here's a question from Rezwan Ramli. Is there a sequel and any possibility this book turns into a movie or TV series?
There's always a possibility. I Oh, I recognize Rezwan's picture. I've been tagged in some things on Instagram. So hello, thank you. I think if you call for it, it may happen. So anyone that wants a sequel and anyone that wants a movie, shout about it and help me. But I think, I don't know, like where to go with the sequel necessarily, because you leave Michael at age 19. And so in terms of YA, that's kind of like the cutoff point. And so I don't know whether it's going to be a case of, staying right there in that age 19 and what could happen then, or are there other characters in the book that could have a sequel or a spin-off? So I don't know. I've kind of been looking at the world and of the book, and I feel like I told quite a complete story. So I'm not sure if I will be writing a sequel, but I could change my mind. So we shall see.
I love your answer about the movie, though. I always tell people that. It's like, if you want a movie, then shout about the book.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one from Wendy Olson. How much of you is in the character of Michael?
A lot of the emotions I felt, I draw on the emotional truth from some of my own experiences. But I think Michael is very different to me in the fact that, if I had been a young person today, I might have been more like Michael. But I think Michael has a lot more opportunity to express himself as a teenager, and he has a lot more role models, that he's aware of, because when I was at school, there was a law in place called Section 28 in the UK, and it meant that teachers couldn't promote homosexuality, was the kind of what they said. So you couldn't talk about anything gay. You couldn't have gay books in school, and it was a really dark time, and a lot of kids lost out on the possibility of knowing about literature or having role models, in terms of teachers couldn't be out, and it was really difficult. Reflecting back on it, and also because I visit schools so much now, and they have like LGBT groups in schools, and I'm like, you guys are so lucky. Like, I wish I had this. So I think writing this book, I thought about what childhood do I wish I had, how do I wish it went for me, and what lessons do I wish I learned a bit earlier. So I think Michael kind of gets a lot of learning and growing out the way quite young. Some of the things that Michael learns in the book, I don't think I learned till I was in my late 20s, to be honest, if not my 30s. But I think that's the reality for my generation. Like, a lot of things happened later for us, whether it's coming out or whether having our first serious relationship, or so many things. So I just think it's got better basically for young people, and I want to reflect that. So I had to remember how much potential there is for young people today to be really free to express who they are.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question that's very interesting from Ryan Casares Merel. If we were to take a peek into Michael's life, what would he be doing right now?
Right now, maybe painting a banner for the next Black Lives Matter protest, and it would say Black Trans Lives Matter, and he'd probably be going down with his whole drag family to whenever the next protest was, and he'd be in drag as the Black Flamingo, and he'd be there with Miss B and all his other drag family, and they'd be speaking truth to power. And yeah, I think it'd be preparing for the next protest. Definitely.
Yeah, I would think so. Okay, here's one from Joel Alvarez. What character is your favorite?
In the Black Flamingo, I guess I really like Daisy. I obviously relate most to Michael, but I really like Daisy because I think she has a huge amount of growth in the book. She kind of deals with a lot of internalized shame as well, and confusion that she kind of reckons with and comes around and makes amends, with Michael, and becomes more confident in herself as well. We don't see a lot of her story because it's more, from Michael's point of view. And so, but I just think I really enjoyed writing her, and, giving her a bit more of a challenging journey maybe than Michael had. I think her journey isn't so linear, but that is probably a reality for lots of people. So yeah, I really enjoyed her because I think she was very strong, and she'd had to deal with a lot even before she'd met Michael. And I have an idea of what her life was like before she became best friends with Michael, but that's not in the book. But I really, yeah, have enjoyed people's responses to Daisy as well. I think a lot of people are like, I want more from Daisy. I want to know more about her. She was so fierce. She was so cool. And yeah, I felt that writing her. And so, if ever we did make the Black Flamingo into a series or a film, or if there was a sequel, yeah, you'd probably get more of Daisy because I really enjoyed her.
Yeah, and I by the way, I loved her. She was probably my favorite, and there have been a whole slew of comments here about her. Hannah Good says Daisy spin off. We need this queer queen story. Casey Rhodes says write a book on Daisy's story. So there's a lot of Daisy love in these comments. Okay.
And can
Casey
can I
Rhodes.
say one thing?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, I was really kind of wanting to write a character quite close to my own identity, because I think, our own voices is quite important. And I wasn't sure if it was my place to write, a lesbian story. And now that I feel more kind of confident, in writing fiction and writing stories, I think, and I can see it can be done well. You don't have to have had that direct lived experience to write a character. You can do your research, and you can, talk to people, and you can read around. And so I now feel like, yeah, I may be writing characters that aren't just mixed race gay characters. There will be more variety. I'll have a bit more range in the future. But I wanted to play it safe to start, and I think it paid off. So.
Well, okay. Well, maybe this question will be a slight pivot from that. Casey Rhodes asked, "Would you ever write a memoir?"
Yeah, but I want to live a bit more. I want some more fantastic things to happen in my life before I write the memoir. Yeah, so I'd be glad to write it if people would be interested to read it, but I think I want to have a bit more to say. I want to go on a bit more of a journey, so that I can, I know what the point of the book is. I think memoirs don't just tell a story there. I think they inspire, and they kind of like show a journey, and you need to kind of have some distance maybe as well to reflect. So I think I'd want to have gone through whatever the main journey in the book was going to be. So then I'd have a few years after that, and then I'd write it on reflection. I don't think you can write a memoir that ends on like the day you finish writing it. Do you know what I mean? Like writing right up until the present moment. Yeah, I'd need a bit of distance from whatever period of my life I'd want to write about. But I've seen some really cool memoirs, you know, that do some really great things. So there's a memoir by Pete Perfides called Broken Greek, and he uses like music, pop music, and his relationship to different records as a way of kind of reflecting on parts of his childhood. And have you read it? Because you'd love it, because you love music.
I love music. It's so fun. If I were ever to write a memoir, that would be, I've always thought that would be my way in.
Okay.
There's
I'll
so
send
many
you the link.
Yeah, send me the link. There's so many inventive ways of writing memoirs now. I feel like people are doing such incredible things, like memoirs written in essay form, or, you know, different ways in. Okay, back to this book. Ashley Straw-Snyder asks, how many drafts of the book did you have?
Wow, in the tens. I don't know, like 20, 30. I don't many. And it's interesting because when you get the final draft, you think you're done, and then it goes through this copy editing thing, like, which is kind of just, it goes back and forth with all these minor changes, but like hundreds of them, like, and it's, or thousands of them sometimes. So I think I thought I was done when I kind of delivered what was the final draft, but then and my editor was happy, but then it goes to copy edits, and that's actually quite an involved process.
Yeah.
And you know, and with poetry or a novel in verse as well, anything can really change the book. Where you put a comma, where you put a line break, you know, whether you italicize things or not, makes a huge difference to how it's read. And so I had to pay really close attention to that. And so yeah, it was a whole long and involved process, and I didn't expect that, because I hadn't gone through it before. So now I know what to expect with future books. But it, you know, kind of technically, you know, probably went through, yeah, like 20, 30 drafts maybe. But then after that, it then also went through copy edits. And I also didn't write the book in a linear fashion. I wrote pieces of it and then kind of put it together. I kind of jumped around. I just wrote whatever I felt inspired to write that day. I didn't sit down and write it from beginning to end. I was like, I'm going to write a bit from when he's a child. Now I'm going to write a bit from when he's a teenager. Now, like, I wrote the ending quite early on, because I wanted to do that final drag performance and get it down. And then I also kind of thought about who would be in the audience for his final performance. And so that helped me kind of write the middle of the book, because who's important to him was made really apparent by who was in the audience at his final performance. And so it's like, what's the journey there? And, you know, how does he feel about them being there? What kind of, how are the stakes raised by, you know, his crush being there, or his best friend being there, or whoever else not being there as well? Who doesn't he tell about the performance, and that's why they're not there? So there's a lot going on. And yeah, the drafts were many, plentiful drafts, and the book changed in lots of ways. Like,
what
some
was one
themes.
of the biggest, what was one of the biggest changes that you're willing to share?
That I'm willing to share.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I certainly
think,
don't like to tell everyone about what happens in my rough drafts.
well, I'd say, like, Michael is dyslexic, and that isn't explicitly spelled out in the book, but it is kind of leaned upon, you know, in the terms of, like, Daisy really helps him with his studying and his revision, and she makes index cards for him to prepare for exams, and he really leans on her. And that is because he's dyslexic. And I didn't really kind of make that super clear, because it was kind of a whole nother, like, side narrative that kind of wasn't needed for the kind of main thrust of the story. But that's something that I guess people should know. And that was important to me, you know, to have that, I guess, in a way, because I'm dyslexic. And so it's one of the reasons I never thought I was going to write a novel, and the reason I write poetry, because it's short and a bit easier, I think. But yeah, there we go. And I do try and tell young people when I do school visits and stuff that I'm dyslexic, because they're quite amazed that someone who is dyslexic is a writer as their job.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I think we're about at the end, so I'll have one more question from the audience, but I think it probably has to be the last one, unfortunately, from Lila Zorn. What really helped you write this book? Any tips to future writers?
What helped me? I think my community of writers that I'm kind of a part of. So other friends that were working on books or poetry or whatever they were doing, we'd read bits to each other or share with each other and give each other feedback, or sometimes just sitting and writing with someone that was working on something else, but being in that kind of creative bubble with them. So, you know, even if you can't do that in person, just getting someone up on the computer and both saying we're gonna write for an hour and then we'll check in with each other. Having writing buddies was really, really helpful. You know, and as well as, you know, having an editor to check in with, but prior to that, just having friends that you know, other writers. So I'd say if you can kind of pair up with someone else that, you know, likes to write, or join a writing group, I think that's the probably number one thing. You need community. Writing doesn't have to be a lonely, solitary endeavor. You can, even if you're not writing in the same genre, you can still help each other out and listen to each other, give each other feedback, and that support and encouragement, and you know, that you know, sit down with each other in person or online, and you know, write for an hour or two and hold each other accountable to keep going, and you know, even when it feels tough. So yeah, buddies.
I love that. Well, I think we're at the end now. Thank you, Dean, for this chat, but most of all for writing this book. Just to remind everybody.
What about your book?
What about my book?
I love your book, and I want to be able to tell you now for everyone to see. This is such an important book, looking at such a important time in our history, and with a really unique perspective. And so I'd say anyone that wants to know anything about queer history or love in a queer perspective, this is the book to look at. So thank you for this book, Abdi.
Thank you. Well, it was an honor to do this and facilitate this book club discussion. Please, everyone, support these books, get a copy for yourself, gift them to people who you think might be helped by them. These books really can save young people the way that art saved so many of us when we were young. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Abdi.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.